A few weeks ago, the owner of an East Tennessee slaughterhouse pleaded guilty in federal court to employing undocumented immigrants. Now, this came after a highly publicized ICE raid in April. Under Tennessee law, the state can revoke licenses for businesses that employ undocumented immigrants. But we know that's rarely happening, right? In fact, in a majority of the cases, those businesses are instead fined. So it's clear that violations are happening, but my question to you both is, at what point should a license be revoked? Mr. Lee, we're going to begin with you.
You know, we face a lot of difficult circumstances as leaders, but as a governor, my highest responsibility is to enforce the law. And we are a nation that is built on laws, and we have to, if we don't enforce laws, then we open ourselves up to lawlessness. And so if the law is on the books, then it ought to be enforced. And I would be a governor who would enforce those laws around those particular circumstances.
Mr. Lee.
License, if it's on the books for licenses to be revoked, they should be.
Mr. Lee, thank you very much. Mr. Dean, I'm going to ask you the same question.
Well, I think you enforce the law clearly and you follow the law. But let me say this. I mean, the immigration issues, which were a huge part of the Republican primary, to the point where all you were seeing is commercials about who's going to build the biggest wall, and is the wall actually going to be built in Memphis, or, you know, is a governor going to run immigration? And Bill Haslam had the good sense and the leadership skills to say, look, this isn't what this race is about. You're not in charge of immigration. You're not in charge of the wall. We have been waiting for the federal government under the George W. Bush administration, the Barack Obama administration, and now the Donald Trump administration to reform immigration law. That's where the responsibility lies. I think we follow the laws on our books, and we got to have the nerve to do that across the board if we're going to do that. But we do not let ourselves become a replacement for the federal government on immigration. And then we shouldn't lose this basic value as the political dialogue gets more and more heated and we look for kind of little points to make, that people who live in our country, who are new to our country, they're not our enemies. They're not our enemies. They're a part of our communities.
Okay, I have a follow-up for you, though, for both of you. Currently, only businesses that employ like 50 people or more are required to use the E-Verify system, you know, to check immigration status of their employees. Would both of you be in favor of making this a requirement for all businesses? Mr. Lee, let's start with you.
It depends on what regulatory burden that places on small businesses. We have to create an environment in this state for businesses to thrive. And small businesses are the backbone of our economy, and over-regulating and putting burdens on small businesses is not the way to go. I do, however, think that we can move toward enforcement, and we certainly ought to look at E-Verify for small businesses, but we ought to consider the impact that it has on them before we make that blanket law.
So that's a maybe.
That's a maybe.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lee. Mr. Dean.
I essentially agree with Mr. Lee, although I would say, you know, if we're going to enforce the law, you don't say we can't afford to force it against everybody. It then raises all these fairness issues. But if we're going to do it, then I think we have to do it. But it's going to create a lot of problems for business. It's going to create a lot of problems for agriculture, and it's going to create a lot of problems for people who have no idea that they even have a problem. And I would say the story that you led off with about what happened in East Tennessee, I mean, that was a particularly bad actor there, I think, in terms of conditions of the factory, not paying taxes, and all sorts of abuse.
Mr. Dean, thank you so much. Bob.
Thank you.